Think back to that pivotal moment in your decades-long spiritual journey, not the peaceful sunrise meditation that went exactly as planned, but that challenging session when everything felt off. Your trusted meditation cushion seemed to have turned to stone. Your usually manageable thoughts swirled like a tempest, and your body ached in protest. Yet somehow, in that very crucible of discomfort, something profound emerged. This is no coincidence, but rather what our ancient tradition calls tapas, the transformative fire that every serious practitioner eventually discovers. Remember that retreat last year, the one where you almost left on day 3 because the inner resistance felt unbearable. Those who've walked this path for years know a truth rarely discussed in spiritual circles. Our deepest revelations often emerge not from our most blissful moments, but from periods of intense spiritual friction. The Yoga Sutras speak of this phenomenon, though perhaps not in the way we initially understood. When Patanjali discusses tapas, he's not merely advocating for austerity. He's pointing to something you've likely experienced, that mysterious alchemy where our greatest obstacles transform into doorways of awakening. Think of your own practice. That morning when your sciatica flared during meditation, forcing you to find a new way to sit. The death of a loved one that shattered your spiritual assumptions but deepened your understanding. Even that frustrating period when your trusted meditation technique seemed to stop working. These weren't obstacles. They were what the tradition calls tapasya kshana, moments of transformative intensity. Just as a quantum particle must gather sufficient energy before making a leap to a higher state, our consciousness requires these periods of resistance. You felt this in your own practice, haven't you? Those moments when everything you thought you knew about spirituality was challenged, yet something deeper emerged. 3 distinct faces of this resistance appear in our practice. First, there's the physical dimension, what we might call body wisdom. Remember that knee pain during your first week-long retreat, or the back tension during pranayama. These aren't barriers, but doorways. When we stay present with physical resistance, something the Yoga Sutras calls sthira sukham emerges, that sweet spot where steadiness meets surrender. Then there's the mental landscape. We've all encountered those teachings that initially made us uncomfortable, challenging our cherished spiritual beliefs. Yet, as you've discovered, this mental friction often burns away our limitations, revealing deeper truths. The tradition calls this viveka, discriminative wisdom born of challenge. The subtlest level occurs in what we might call the wisdom body, that space where our current understanding meets our potential for expansion. Like the space between quantum states, this gap can only be crossed through the accumulated energy of sustained practice. Consider these practical approaches, refined through centuries of practice. Dawn practice. Begin your day when the world is still dark and quiet. You know that precious time before the phone starts ringing and emails demand attention. Sit with whatever arises: physical discomfort, mental resistance, emotional turbulence. Don't fight it. Witness it with the same attention you'd give to your teacher's words. Walking meditation. Take your practice into movement. Notice how resistance shows up differently when you're walking. Let each step become a conversation with whatever arises. You might discover, as many practitioners do, that movement reveals patterns hidden in stillness. The sacred pause. Throughout your day, especially in moments of challenge, pause. Notice the resistance, whether it's during a difficult conversation with your adult child or facing a health challenge, these are your practice moments. Evening, reflection. Before sleep, review your day's encounters with resistance, not to judge, but to understand. Notice patterns. What triggers your strongest reactions? Where do you tend to pull back? This nighttime practice plants seeds that often flower in morning meditation. Weekly integration. Once every 7 days, perhaps on your usual long meditation day, practice complete acceptance of your current limitations. This isn't giving up. It's what the tradition calls Purna Samarpana, total offering to the process. 3. Wisdom keys from mature practice. First, notice how resistance appears differently now than it did years ago. Where once you might have encountered it as an enemy, now you recognize its familiar face, like an old teacher arriving with a new lesson. This is what the tradition calls Prajna Parinati, the maturation of wisdom. Second, observe how your response to resistance has evolved. Remember those early years when you'd struggle against a wandering mind. Now you smile at the same thoughts, knowing they too are part of the path. This natural evolution comes from what the ancients called Kala Shakti, the transformative power of time in spiritual practice. Finally, trust the wisdom you've gained through experience. When resistance appears in your practice now, there's a deeper knowing, an understanding that this too is grace unfolding. This is what the tradition points to when it speaks of Shraddha, that unshakable faith born not of belief, but of direct experience. Here's the paradox every mature practitioner must face. The more we resist resistance, the stronger it becomes. Yet when we embrace it as our teacher, it transforms into the very force that elevates our consciousness. Remember, just as light manifests as both particle and wave, your spiritual evolution expresses through both gentle unfoldment and quantum leaps. The key isn't to overcome resistance, but to recognize it as the purifying principle it truly is. As you continue this noble journey, consider this ancient wisdom. What appears as an obstacle contains within it the seed of transformation. Every challenge in your practice, whether it's physical limitation, emotional turbulence, or spiritual doubt, carries the potential for breakthrough. For as the great sages discovered, and as your own practice has likely shown, the obstacle itself is the path. Are you ready to embrace this forgotten quantum law of spiritual growth? Let this understanding transform not just your formal practice, but every challenge life presents.